Hello and welcome to Craftiosity, where creativity comes to you, with monthly craft kits delivered to your door. This month, you'll create a stunning and creative macrame dressed bottle, complete with natural dried bunny tails. Inside your kit, you'll find a bag of 20 wooden beads, a tapestry needle, one ball of Seaside blue cotton yarn, one long neck glass bottle, and a bunch of dried bunny tails, also known as Lagurus. You'll also find your step-by-step photo instructions and a little something for your pinboard. Let's start by cutting 20 pieces of cotton yarn, each measuring 140 centimeters long. Take your time to measure and cut them accurately. Now, take one piece of yarn and tie a slip knot halfway along. Find the halfway point on your yarn and make a loop with one side underneath and to the left, and one side on top and to the right. Take the loop and lift it to place it on top of the strand on the right. You should have a loop with a strand underneath running across the middle. Hold that strand and pull it up through the loop. Pull the left and right strands to tighten. You should have a loop with a knot underneath. Now, loop your slip knot over the neck of the bottle. Don't tighten it just yet. Then, take a strand of yarn and use a lark's head knot to join them to your slip knot loop. Fold the first strand in half, then take the folded part, place it over the slip knot loop, and bring the tails of your folded strand through the folded over part. Pull down to tighten. Repeat this process with the remaining yarn strands, working your way around the slip knot loop. You should now have 40 single strands of yarn hanging down, including the two tails of your slip knot. Tighten up your slip knot as far as it will go by pulling apart the two yarn tails. Now let's work with 4 strands of yarn at a time to tie a row of 10 square knots. Take the left strand and make an L shape on top of the middle 2 strands. Then take the right strand and place it vertically on top of the bottom of the L shape. You should have a shape resembling a number 4. Bring the bottom of the right strand behind everything and out through the space next to the left strand. Tighten up your knot by pulling the left and right strands apart and upwards. The knot should sit just below your lark's head knot at the top. To tie the second part of the square knot, you will repeat this process but reversed. Take the right strand and make a back to frontal on top of the 2 middle strands. Place the left strand vertically on top of the bottom of the L shape. Bring the bottom of the left strand behind everything and out through the space next to the right strand. Tighten up your knot by pulling the left and right strands apart and upwards. Repeat this process of tying a square knot with each set of 4 strands around your bottle. Now, let's tie a row of alternating square knots directly underneath your first row. Take the right 2 strands from one knot, and then the left 2 strands from the knot on the right. Use these 4 strands to tie a square knot that sits below the knots on the row above. Repeat this process and tie 3 more rows of alternating square knots in the same way as before. Leave a small space between each row of knots to keep them sitting flush against the bottle. Adjust the space between each row to compensate for the widening of the bottle neck. Tie another row of alternating square knots, leaving a bigger gap than previously. Your knots should now sit on the straight side of the bottle. Tie a second square knot directly underneath the first one using the same 4 strands of yarn. Now it's time to add a touch of elegance with wooden beads. Add a wooden bead underneath each square knot by threading the middle 2 yarn strands through your needle. Thread the bead so it sits directly under the square knot. Tie a final square knot underneath the bead to hold it in position. Repeat this all the way around the bottle. Dropping down and leaving a space, tie a row of alternating square knots. Add a wooden bead underneath each of these square knots using the tapestry needle. Tie a square knot under each bead to secure them in position. From your remaining cotton yarn, cut 20 more yarn strands, each measuring 60 centimeters. This yarn will be added in to increase your knots from 10 per row up to 20 knots per row. Take the 4 strands from one of your square knots and split them into 2 pairs. Fold one of your 60 centimeter strands in half to find the center point and position it underneath one pair. You should now have 4 strands of yarn. Use these 4 strands to tie a square knot in the same way as before. Take the other pair of strands and add a new 60 centimeter strand using the same process. Tie a square knot with these 4 strands. Repeat this process of splitting the strands and adding in new strands with each of your 10 square knots. You should now have a row of 20 square knots. Now tie a row of alternating square knots directly underneath this row. Do not leave a gap between these rows. It's time to create an inverted triangle out of square knots. Separate off the strands from 5 of your square knots, making sure to choose ones that are next to each other. You should have 20 strands in total, the first 2 strands and last 2 strands of the 20 strands. Using the remaining 16 strands, tie a row of 4 alternating square knots underneath. Make sure these knots stay on a separate row from the knots above. Then, tie a row of 3 square knots underneath, again skipping the first 2 and last 2 strands. Repeat the process again to tie a row of 2 square knots on the row below, skipping the first 2 and last 2 strands. Finally, use the middle 4 strands to tie a single square knot. This will form the point of your triangle. Repeat this whole process to tie 3 more triangles of square knots around your bottle. Each time, you should be using a new set of 20 strands. Now, we will tie a row of clove hitch knots that will run diagonally along the 2 sides of each triangle. They should join in the center, underneath the point of your triangle. Take the outer strand on the left side of your triangle. You will use this as your filler cord that the other cords will wrap around. Bring it diagonally across the top of your other cords, following the side of the triangle of square knots. Find the next cord along on the left side of the triangle. Bring it round and through the gap to the left of the cord. Pull to tighten the loop. Take the same cord and bring it over on top of the filler cord, creating a loop underneath. Pass the cord round and under the filler cord and through the loop you created. Pull to tighten. You will have 2 loops wrapped around the filler cord. Repeat with each of your cords, working from left to right. Repeat this process on the right-hand side of your triangle. Your knots will be tied in the same way, except each cord will go over and through the gap on the right. Now, tie a row of clove hitch knots diagonally alongside each of your remaining 3 triangles. Trim the bottom of your yarn strands. You can trim the strands to any length you like, but we recommend not leaving them longer than the height of your bottle. We cut ours diagonally, following the angle of the clove hitch knots, but you could also trim them straight across if you prefer. Finally, untwist your yarn strands to give a soft fringed effect. Use your tapestry needle to help separate the individual threads. Give a final trim to neaten up any uneven parts. Congratulations! Your macrame bottle is now complete. Arrange your dried bunny tails in the bottle and display it proudly. Thank you for joining us in this crafting tutorial. We hope you enjoyed creating your macrame bottle, and we look forward to welcoming you to the next craft kit project next month. Don't forget to share your creations with us.